Hello, I'm Jake Boudrot, Civic Journalist at Tello Community Television. This week, on The Record. Richmond Municipal Council held its Committee of the Whole session on December 13th in Arichat. After the meeting, I spoke with Warden Lois Landry. Andy Thompson, community developer with Aging Well Nova Scotia, and Liam Cook, retrofit navigator, made a presentation to Council about net zero community buildings.
Thanks for having me, and when Liam gets online as well. Tonight we're going to present an idea. I think it's an idea worth replicating. We're wrapping up a net zero community buildings project in Pictou County, and it started with an idea about 3 years ago, and then we just worked the idea. And we want to share our findings and all of our experiences with you, and hopefully you guys can do something special down here in Richmond County. For those who don't know me, my name's Andy Thompson. I'm a community developer with Aging Well Nova Scotia. That's why I'm here today. But like you, I have another job. I'm a councillor in the county of Pictou. So I have a lot of experience working in very rural and remote areas of my county. My district is very rural and remote and very suburban at the same time. And I have a lot of community halls, a lot of fire departments. Liam's the expert. I'm the person that sort of took the idea to him and he brought it to life. And so he has a small boutique company in Halifax where he helps businesses and nonprofits navigate through all your energy retrofits. In his former life, he worked at Efficiency Nova Scotia, and he developed a lot of the rebate programs, so he understands how the game works. The whole idea of this thing is that the rural community hall is the last thing standing in your community. A lot of your small communities, you're losing your gathering spots, your churches, and all those things are there's a bit of a contraction, so we have to double down and invest in our communities. This is a picture of Floyd Koch out at the Dalhousie Snowmobile Club out in Elmfield, and they're part of this project, and very happy to be part of it. So again, we're losing these last community assets, and energy costs are a big driver of these buildings going. Like any time you drive by a community center and they have an oil tank hooked to the side of their building, you're like, oh boy, there's a challenge there, right? So the vision for this was basically to organize people into like more than one community center at a time. We grouped them together. There was 21 in this project, and we basically looked at the simplest stuff, your most affordable upgrades, your insulations, heat pumps, LED lights, solar on the roof to offset the electrical costs. Again, the key challenges, like at the local volunteer level, there's not a lot of capacity to do a lot of this very specific work, and that's where a navigator like Liam would come in. By grouping them together, you'll gain the attention of a lot of the larger pots of money, right? If you're going there looking for $25,000 for one building, funders will go, yeah, that's a nice idea. But if you go there and you say, I have 20 buildings and we can do this, you caught their attention, and there's lots of funding programs that you can uncover with that. So here's a picture of me out in Sunnybray. I'm with Sean Fraser, and we're in this old Oddfellows Hall that needs a lot of updates. And I keep telling Sean, trust me, when we're done fixing this building up, it won't look like this. So I guess in this instance, I'm that community champion. I'm the one that's on the ground pushing the community groups to write grants to fix things up. So you need that trusted person on the ground in Richmond County too. You need that one that's going to push the boulder up the hill. So Liam would be what we call a dedicated navigator. So when I first started working on this project, I was doing it without Liam. And I was gathering energy audits from all these buildings. So I was gathering all this information, quotes for solar and all that stuff. And I got to a certain point and I said, I outsmarted myself. I needed an expert. So we applied and received for funding through the Low Carbon Communities Program provincially to hire a project manager. After I hired Liam with that Low Carbon Communities grant, his first job was to put an application together for the 21 community buildings for a Sustainable Communities Challenge Fund grant. And we applied for $600,000, the maximum amount you could do. And we had lots of response. We started out, like I said before, about a half dozen buildings is what I was originally had in my cohort of buildings, and then it grew to like 21 because people were finding out what I was doing, and I just kept saying yes, right? So we built a big project, and we even have a community rink in that, the Thorburn, the Ivor McDonald Memorial Rink's involved in that. Didn't get them to zero. Rinks are hard to get to zero, but we provided them with some help as well. So 42 letters of support. We identified about $115,000 combined in energy savings annually if we did this project, which we're almost done. So I don't know if you want to go from there and talk about the project funders. I think I mentioned it. There's 21 buildings in this project. We identified about $750,000 in Efficiency Nova Scotia rebates combined. And this is the sort of the parlor trick, because a lot of these buildings don't have a bank account to fix their buildings up. This was used as their contribution to the project. Okay? And the other thing we did with this project, and it would be something you could do down here, we had a lead applicant. We had one of the nonprofit groups that had good financial controls on their money, bank accounts, bookkeeping, accounting, all the reporting stuff you need to do for these big funds. We had one applicant, lead applicant for the 21 buildings, which was kind of unique, and that was a nonprofit. There's no, although I'm a municipal councillor, there's no municipal money in this other than the funding we got through SCCF.
Andy and I working on behalf of 21 community centers. We had an independent oversight board, which was made up of participating community centers. In the future, definitely there's opportunities of having municipal staff on that oversight board to tie in more of the municipal supports that may be available for those nonprofits. In our case, we had Andy as a member of that oversight board and 4 other community center members, which would oversee the transparent flow of funding from all of those funders, and ultimately the approvals that would go with paying contractors at the end of the day. We hosted several community engagement sessions, both in person and virtual sessions like this one, to gauge interest in the program initially, and then to provide updates to our participants as we went through this project across 20 community centers. Obviously, each community center, each community hall was provided a dedicated navigator to help guide what decisions were best for their own buildings. So those individuals would receive an energy audit. It would give them a full scope of work that could be done, and then we would sit down with the building owners and decide what made the most sense for their own properties. From there, we developed that building level scope of work, go out to contractors, get full quotes on what the projects would cost, and then built basically a revolving drawdown fund. So that mention of 1.35 million was essentially 600,000 capital, which would pay out contractors as the work was completed, and then Efficiency Nova Scotia rebates and other grants which basically top that fund up, though not at 100% level. So typically those rebate programs were paying anywhere from about 50 to 80% of total project costs. The community halls approved all of the work, so contractors were paid once community halls agreed that signed off that they were satisfied with the quality of work in their center. And in doing so, we were able to build out a larger contractor network locally, where we weren't as reliant on contractors coming from urban hubs. We could work locally with the contractors that would be servicing that equipment for the lifespan of the building. And then finally, coordinating all of the final energy assessments with Efficiency Nova Scotia so that we could close those projects out. And so for each of these buildings, we'd be looking at reviewing project eligibility, what equipment, what measures could be done in the building, and which ones would be eligible for grants and rebates, prioritizing those based on the energy audit and recommendations that came from it. We would work with local contractors, and in some cases bringing contractors up because we had an aggregate of scale to get the small community centers that are 45 minutes outside of an urban hub the same support as the community center that's right in the heart of an urban community. We coordinate those grades so that, one, they're not working directly on top of each other, but two, so that they're sequenced in the right schedule and right manner, minimizing disruptions in those community halls. The work would happen, the community hall would sign off, and then we'd have the funding fully reimbursed back through. Only one focus on upgrades that were universal. Folks could implement these upgrades in their own homes, they could implement them in their own businesses, and ideally inspire the community that surrounds these community halls. The first and foremost thing to do was get a better understanding with an energy audit, condition walkthrough, identifying what work could be done, then look at the building envelope, increasing insulation, putting in controls so that we're saving energy first or reducing wasted energy with energy conservation measures. Next, energy efficiency upgrades, stands, LED lighting, cold climate heat pumps, panel upgrades, and finally on-site renewable energy through solar panels. It's not intentional, but about half of the halls that we work with are already that comfort center in the community. The upgrades that we're providing to these spaces means, one, that they stay warmer longer with energy, with insulation upgrades, with better heating and cooling equipment. Means that, two, they can be used in extreme heat events where beforehand they didn't have cooling. Now they're a space where youth and seniors can come to get away from that heat. And lastly, we're seeing these spaces be used more and more by emergency management services. It's not happening today, but in future iterations, we'd absolutely love to see a way that we can get organizations like Nova Scotia Guard or Emergency Management Services to be more involved. As Andy says, you can't use a fire truck that's not maintained, that doesn't have water ready to go. Having these community centers be that hub of resilience with these upgrades just does double duty to work that's already. And so we're breathing new life into old spaces. The unintended benefits of this is renewed interest in community spaces. They're being used more than they were before these upgrades ever happened. We're seeing local residents be inspired by the upgrades, saying, okay, there's someone down the road that can service that heat pump. There's an industry being built around solar panels and equipment. Insulation is something that most of us can do in our own homes. Same thing with these community centers. The biggest one for the centers themselves is eliminating that biggest cost burden and operating cost to them so that they're no longer facing closure. Personal benefit as a dad is seeing 30,000 liters of annual oil use eliminated from Pictou County from this one project alone. That's year over year. And obviously the GHG reduction emissions that go hand in hand with that. And so that was the past project. We're seeing and finding new opportunities for other communities and counties outside of Pictou County. And that's the purpose that Andy and I bring tonight. And so Navigate Energy is a expert provider with the Climate Ready Infrastructure Service that's specifically designed to support rural communities under 30,000 residents with free support to assess those nonprofit halls with the energy audits, the walkthroughs, identify what could take place and could happen. We're also have recently received some funding from an organization called HCI3, which is allowing us to go out and get funding support, talk to larger funders that would be looking at investing in those grades down the road. And so at the moment, we're in the project planning phase, identifying community centers that would like to participate, would love the benefit of a $0 energy bill, and laying the groundwork, talking with larger funding organizations, provincial, federal organizations, and others about what that capital fund could look like to bring us to rural communities across the province.
The presentation seems to involve leveraging funding using rebates to pay for the conversion from oil to heat pumps and solar. Is that essentially what we're?
Yeah, so essentially what they're saying is a lot of projects say, listen, we're going to pay some, you're going to pay some. So there's grants that you can get, but it'll only cover, say, 70% of your cost. You're expected to pony up the other 30%, but you can also apply for rebates. That can be really tricky for halls to try to pay out and then get reimbursed. So what this is talking about is using potential or prospective rebates from Efficiency Nova Scotia as your contribution in kind. So you apply for a fund and you say, here's the 30% we're going to get in energy rebates, plus the 70% that you're going to give us. And that kind of goes into the kitty. And then as you do the work, you apply for the rebates and those rebates go back into the kitty. So it really is about strength in numbers and leveraging dollars and programs that are available in the most efficient ways.
Councillors, questions? Councillor Marchand?
Liam, you mentioned this revolving drawdown fund, and you spoke of 1.3 million, which ended up being 600,000. Can you explain that? Did you get 100 or 1 million from the government, but we're only able to use 600,000 of that?
What we did was we applied for $600,000 from the Sustainable Communities Challenge Fund, and we used that to start the project. And the revolving fund is, we would pay out of our, we'll call it the bank account, we would pay the invoices for a specific community hall, submit those, the only stipulation was the community hall would sign over their rebates, which would go back into the bank account. And you would revolve that money, the rebate money through, so that would turn into over $1 million.
Who managed that? Was that Liam, or was that you took one of the halls that you said had some accounting and?
In all your volunteer groups that you have expertise, and I tapped into a person that works at an accounting firm to do the books for the project, specific for reporting purposes, and she was also on that steering committee we mentioned, along with a couple other people that had experience with grants and projects and all that good stuff. So we had the local experts that managed the money.
I mean, Liam's the expert with doing the grants?
Liam's the expert in all of the energy rebates, efficiency touches that we do on the buildings. He's the one, I call him sort of like a quarterback. He's the one that says, okay, we're going to send the insulators over to Garden of Eden, and we're going to send the people doing the heat pumps to Merrigan-Mish and all that in our project. He was the one that sort of quarterbacked that work. He would organize it, make sure the work was done properly, and then he would approve it for payment. And then we had a process, I guess is the best way to do it. Like it wasn't something that was just done in a pick on the fly.
Liam, you mentioned something about a zero power bill. So right now, when you're, I guess, either feeding the grid with solar or whatever, does Nova Scotia Power rebate you any money, credit you any money, or you can just bring your bill down to zero and that's it? So if you're overproducing and not using it, like you upgrade your solar system to be a little more than your annual usage, you're actually putting power back on the grid that you're not getting credit for. Is that how I understand what you said there?
That's exactly it, yeah. So we use the net metering program provided by Nova Scotia Power, and it's just that. It gives you a credit on your consumption to net that down to zero, but you cannot make money off of that program if you overproduce.
Thanks, Warden. So a couple of questions. So the first question I have is on this, the Sustainable Communities Challenge Fund. That is generally, I think, an 80% contribution. Did you have to come up with the other 20? Or was it, or did you get 100% out of that fund? Do you remember?
I think we had, Liam, correct me if I'm wrong,
This is where,
yeah, go ahead.
so the Sustainable Communities Challenge Fund allowed us to use the rebate dollars they would see as that community investment. So typically the rebates would go to a community center. Instead, they gave up that and used that as their, in lieu of community funding. And so this would be that 20% match. In this case, the program was a 30-70 split, so 30% community contribution.
Oh, wow. So projected rebate dollars they accepted as a contribution.
Yeah.
Correct. And so we did have that in writing from Efficiency Nova Scotia.
Right.
With the SCCF application.
Okay.
We were in a position to be able to estimate that rebate amount for them.
Okay. And then another question I had is you've talked about the reduction in oil usage in your region as a result of it. You talked about, I think, 1,200 tons of emissions reduction. Who is tracking those stats after the project is finished? Do you stay on to do that? Do you build that into the project? Because I think that impact measurement would be really important.
So the impact measurement is very important. There's two parts that solidify that for us. And so Efficiency Nova Scotia provided the initial energy audit and the final energy audit on these buildings. And with that, they get an energy model. What we've also committed to is following up 12 months later. We know that the oil bills have been brought to zero. So they've eliminated oil offsite. They're no longer getting oil deliveries. What we're interested in learning more about is the solar PV was built on what the building's historical usage has been. In some cases, we've now overproduced that, seeing that there's been increased activity in the spaces. And so it was originally modeled, say, being used 2 or 3 days a week based on historical bills. Now it's looking at how do we size that appropriately if we're going to double the load in that building or double the usage in that building.
Okay.
My question is, so let's suppose you're Richmond County and you're a series of people who have community halls. What would you say are next steps for like-minded, open-minded, curious, interested groups? What are the immediate steps that they could take to see what this looks like here in Richmond?
I think you need to get them together, right, in one room and ask them what their pinch points are. Right? Now I'll go back to the previous question for a second. Some of the buildings that we fixed were seasonal halls. Right. They shut down. They're staying open now. And it's not costing the community anything to operate them. So as far as this, I think that you need to get everybody in the same room and get your oil bills, get your power bills, all that stuff, and put them in a folder for a year or so. How much information do you need, Liam, to start this sort of community center by community center?
There's been two ways of going about this. And so from the community center to community center event is just like Andy and I did with Pictou County, would be have those events where you can bring community centers together to share and demonstrate that this, one, first and foremost, works, and that two, high energy costs are a pain point for them. With that, for the buildings that we did get, was basically 12 months oil and electricity consumption, or propane and electricity consumption, to understand what those costs are to them. We've also identified through the municipalities that a nonprofit organization or the municipality can apply through this CRIS funding, which would essentially allow the municipality to reach out, say, if you're interested in getting an energy audit of your building and a walkthrough, providing those build details, then we get to start building out what that plan and roadmap looks like for your community center. And so there's really two ways, either grassroots or top-down. Hey, if you would like to work with the municipality, we can champion this. There's some funding to help you do so today.
I could see it almost kind of like as a call for interest, where you would submit information about your community hall, the civic address, the size of the hall, what the heating sources are, you know, like some very high level, you know, information that, you know, an organization, whether it's a municipality or another lead, could then put together and say, okay, here's what's coming up, and then gather everyone together to really hash it out, and to demonstrate, as
We
you
do
said.
have,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt, we
Yeah,
do
no.
have that exact form of basically
Okay.
the questions that those community halls that we would be happy to share with council.
Liam, we've done some in one of the halls in my own area. We've done the electrical upgrades and the heat pump upgrades years ago, and the LED lighting. We did all the electrical upgrades to the panels. We've recently added a generator, but we were not allowed to put heat pumps in the kitchen area. So I don't know if any of these halls have functions where they do use the kitchen. So we've had to keep oil there. Do you have any suggestions on that, going to propane, or is there something new now that Health Canada is allowing, or for those kind of things?
Assuming that the reason that they wouldn't allow the heat pumps in the commercial kitchen was basically just the fact that they do have a fan and would potentially be blowing that. So on a commercial, and I'm assuming it's more of a commercial kitchen in that community hall, what we've done in those halls specifically is know that there may be 20% of the building that still functions on electric baseboard heat, and that's okay. It's building the renewable energy system to supplement that, knowing that that portion of the building is going to be still 100% electric or 100% efficient on electric resistance, and utilizing heat pumps in all of your other spaces. So that's what we've done. Basically, anytime where we needed a full backup system.
And now for us to do like a solar system, I guess now we do have our electrical demand, since we put all these heat pumps in, because that significantly changed the electrical demand. Yes, it cut back on some of the oil, but we use a lot more power now. So if a bunch of halls went together, they don't all have to do everything the same, right? If some just want the solar portion or whatever, you're okay with doing those things? Or are you looking for a total?
Exactly.
Pardon?
So we work with each individual hall to pick the upgrades that make the most sense for them. We had a couple halls that, after the energy audit and recommendations were presented to them, they really only want to move forward with one or two of those upgrades, and that was completely fine with us, with our funders. And so if it was solar PV, outside of the other funding, there is the community solar program still offered by Efficiency Nova Scotia for nonprofits. There's 25% of your project costs, up to $15,000 today. But to aggregate them together in decarbonizing your building stock would be totally fine to add.
That's the problem now with us. Since we've reduced a lot of our oil consumption, we're not really decarbonizing as much. So would they want to pull back some funding on going with a solar system? Because all we're looking to do is cut our energy costs now. Instead of polluting at our building, we're polluting elsewhere with power.
So I would say if you were to come in as a single community hall, Government Efficiency Nova Scotia would direct you to that one program that exists, that single box, to do a broader aggregate, something similar to Pictou County, where you're bringing multiple community centers together that are sharing that resource of a project manager, of a community champion. That's what's of interest to them. And so all of a sudden you're getting the added benefits of these other organizations down at that individual hall.
Thank you, Liam. Okay.
Thank you. I'm recalling that many moons ago, it seems, we had a multi-use assessment, multi-use facility feasibility study. And we heard the 43 million and everybody just sort of, and you know, that's what we took away from that report. But there actually were recommendations in that report that talked about trying to work with community halls to say there are a lot of things that we can do in our existing facilities. And so I'm thinking back to that when I hear some of this in addition to some of the statistics. So I'm wondering if there is an appetite on the part of council to put forth a motion to have staff investigate further just what options might be available to start to either look for a community champion and volunteer sector, or to actually see what our capacity is in council.
I guess the motion would be to direct staff to somehow gather, get all the community halls together, or get as many as want to see if there's any appetite for getting in on a net zero reduction program. Is that how you want it worded?
And I guess to Councillor or to Deputy Warden's point about, sort of have staff explore potentially having an expression of interest to see what halls might be interested in this. And then staff can explore whether or not that's something that the community groups can run with, or is there a role for the municipality to play? So we would be asking staff to explore the opportunities for an expression of interest and other ways the municipality can contribute. So that's the motion on the floor. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Deputy Warden Mumbercat. Any other discussion on that?
Just one.
Yep.
Madam Chair, I just want to make it clear that I think I heard the councillor say as well, this was totally run by the volunteers and the navigator as well, and you as the councillor that got it started. So keeping that in mind, that's what we're going to want to try and emulate here as well. But by all means, the early work, we can do the heavy lift on this to get it going, but we need to find that champion within our community that's going to emulate the efforts that were put forward there as well. Awesome.
And I think we certainly have the capacity to support communication around that. I mean, that's one of the things that we've got going for us, right?
And a workshop day or whatever,
right.
we can pull something together.
Yep. So any other discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion is carried.
When it comes to energy costs for halls, how bad is that problem, and how much is it costing these? You don't really need a dollar figure, but how bad is it?
It depends on how you're using energy in your hall, but I think anybody who has had an oil tank knows that the price to fill it up 5 years ago, 10 years ago is dramatically different than it is now. Plus, it isn't just the cost, it's the fact that we would rather not be burning fossil fuels if we can prevent that. But Councillor Marchand made an interesting point. They got off of oil in the main part of one of the halls in his district, but switching to heat pumps meant the power bill went up. Maybe not dollar for dollar, but it is a considerable cost. We know that halls that can harness renewable energy through solar panels can offset a lot of their costs. So it varies dramatically from building to building. But I think when I looked at the list, I think that I don't know of a single building that has every single one of those things. The right insulation in the walls and roof, the cold weather heat pumps, and then talking about potential siding, and then also just renewable energy and all the things that go along with that, right? So I think there'd be very few community centers, halls, public buildings of that nature that are owned by not-for-profits that wouldn't benefit from looking at a project like this.
During community acknowledgements, the warden spoke about the closure of Shamrock Store in Discouse and the retirement of its owners, Raymond and Pearl LeBlanc.
On November 24th, Ronnie LeBlanc from Discouse posted a simple message on Facebook, accompanied by a picture of his parents, Pearl and Raymond LeBlanc. It said, "Happy 63rd anniversary to my mom and dad today. Stop by the store and wish them the best. They will also be closing the store by the end of December after 58 years of operations." That post was much like Raymond and Pearl, understated and almost averse to any recognition or celebration of all they do and have done for the North Side. But believe me when I say it was as impactful a post as ever there was. Though late, of course, I'd like to extend my belated happy anniversary wishes to Pearl and Raymond, but to a larger extent, I think I speak for an entire community when I say thank you for all you have done, not just as owners of a business, but as supporters of a community for the last 58 plus years. When Almadam was awarded the Lieutenant Governor's Community Spirit Award in 2024, the following excerpt was included in the nomination submission. Several local businesses, some around for generations, support both tourism and small village life alike. Shamrock Store in Discoos is the epitome of what an old-fashioned general store should be. A place where you can buy hunting licenses and milk, Tylenol and fishing lures, bread and bingo markers, and you could in fact buy every one of those things at Shamrock Store. And while all of that is true, the store was so much more. The small bulletin board to the right of the door was where all of us heard about what was going on in the community. Who was playing at the dance, what benefits were planned for those suddenly in need, what apartments were for rent, and how much fishing licenses were for seniors. And I can assure you that if Pearl and Raymond had a penny on the dollar for every bit of money that they graciously gave, donated, or let slide, their retirement would be luxurious and probably involve a beach house somewhere warm. I would also like to give a shout out to David and Carly at Gentil's Mini Mart, who purchased the remaining inventory from Shamrock Store so Pearl and Raymond could fully retire this month. And if you are in the area, I think you should pop by there, as I'm sure there are some gems in that inventory. So to Pearl and Raymond, on behalf of the residents of Discoos, Pullamon, Martinique, Poirieville, Cape-la-Round, Pondville, and Rocky Bay, and beyond, I wish you all the best in your retirement. You have earned every single minute of it.
So in community acknowledgements, you talked about the closing of the Shamrock Store, which closed, I believe, was December 31st. And so maybe you can give your reaction to the loss of this business in Discoos.
Oh my gosh. I mean, community stores and little general stores, really the lifeblood of small communities. We used to have Willard Fougere's store and Doris's store and we had a lot of them, but Pearl and Raymond's store, the Shamrock Store, was really the bastion in the heart of downtown Discoos, 58 years. And I mean, I remember when I was a kid, if I went into the store and I saw that the Feathers were playing at the hall in Discoos, I knew my cousins were coming because my aunt and uncle never missed a dance with the Feathers, right? That was how we knew about who was sick, who they were praying for in church, all of those things. And there was nothing that you couldn't find. And there was nothing that, didn't make you a part of the community. And it was just such an important part. I'm going to tell this little story. You can edit it out if you like. But my first husband, when he first moved to the area, he was baking something and he forgot. He was missing an ingredient. So he ran down to Pearl's store and he said, oh God, I forgot my wallet. And Pearl said, don't worry about it. We'll just charge it. We'll mark it. They didn't say charge, we'll mark it. So Mike comes home and he tells me that he didn't pay for something that he got. I was mortified. I was like, oh my God, you just got here. So I go down to the store the next day and I said, I want to pay the bill. I feel terrible. And Raymond was at the front counter. And I said, my boyfriend came and he said, well, what's his name? And I said, Mike Curry. So he looks under C and it's not there. What's his first name? Mike. Well, he looks under M and it's not there. So he screams at Pearl, what did Lois, did you, the tall blonde fella, did you? And she said, yeah, it's under L for Lois Landry's boyfriend. And that was because Pearl and Raymond knew everything. They knew everybody. They knew who needed help and they gave that help very quietly. So it is a really tremendous loss. And Pearl, if you're listening, my brother went to the superstore for the first time ever. There was really nothing that they wouldn't do for their fellow community members.
Now that leaves, you just mentioned that there's basically no store on all of the north side. So do you hope that something can come in to replace that and offer some kind of a store?
It'd be tricky because, I think there was questions about would somebody take over Pearl and Raymond's store, but that is actually their house. So it'd be uncomfortable, I can imagine, for them to want to do that. So I would be surprised if there was a general store that opened up. Certainly nothing that had like rat poison and Betty Crocker icing. Like it was a full service store, right? So I don't know. So, I know that when Gentil's posted about picking up their inventory, that they said, look, we welcome all the folks from the north side and happy to bring our business to Arichat as much as we can.
Council received correspondence from Minister of Municipal Affairs John A. MacDonald about concerns with the new Code of Conduct for municipal elected officials.
We'll move on to correspondence. So there are no action items, so there are no correspondence that require our attention for action this evening, but we do have some other correspondence. So there is a letter from Minister Tilley that we wrote, that I wrote on behalf of council regarding the town of Mulgrave's request to include Route 344 in the provincial paving plans. There is a letter to the Honourable Julie DeBrusen, Minister of Environment, Climate Change and Nature, regarding the emergency boat ramp in St. Peters. And there is a letter from the Honourable John A. Macdonald, Minister of Municipal Affairs, in response to our letter of October 30th.
The minister's response to your council's concerns about the code of conduct, in the letter, he actually referenced the exact concerns that you guys were talking about and said that others were talking about the same concerns as well. So is that kind of good news to see that that's on the minister's radar and he's aware of what the shortcomings might be?
Yeah, I think that the minister heard loud and clear from some municipalities that were struggling with several challenges with the code of conduct. Specifically, we're paying HR professionals, almost always lawyers, to investigate these concerns, and that's a lot of money. It's a particularly difficult expense to incur if one thing happens and 5 people complain about it, because now a lawyer under the current structure, either 5 lawyers or 1 lawyer 5 times, has to do the exact same complaint. That was never what this was intended to be. So some municipality, and also it was never intended to be, I don't like the way my councillor voted on a topic. I don't agree with that vote. That's not a code of conduct. That's whether or not I'm going to vote for them in the future. And so those kinds of things have been flagged by multiple municipalities. We just want to make sure that there is an onus, recognition that it's important to fix whatever needs to be fixed in a way that still allows the code of conduct regulations to be in place for residents.
Nicholas McGuinness, Warden of the Municipality of the County of Antigonish, sent a letter to council about declining cellular phone service in Antigonish County.
And it's a letter to Tim Houston, Premier, regarding declining cell service in Antigonish County. So we don't put every single piece of correspondence that we're copied on in our package, but this one was something that I felt was significant to us because it is certainly a concern that we have had. And I'm not sure if folks saw the announcement or the post from the town of Port Hawkesbury. They also had a resolution of council to send a letter of some sort regarding declining and deteriorating cell service. So I'm wondering if there is an appetite from council to consider a motion that would authorize the warden and CAO to reach out to neighboring municipalities to see if there is a way to, instead of each municipality sending a letter or something, is there a way for us to leverage more voices in one and to join forces to see if there's a way to advocate for regional concerns about declining and deteriorating cell service?
Warden, I know there used to be, or I'm not sure if there still is, a mayors and wardens and chiefs committee. I'm wondering if that would be I think that would be a very powerful voice. I love the idea of advocating regionally in that manner.
Yeah, and I actually chair that group. It's the chiefs, mayors, and wardens. It includes the 2 towns and Guysborough. So Antigonish Town and County, Guysborough, Mulgrave, and then everything on CBRM, everything except CBRM on the Cape Breton side, and the First Nation communities. That meeting doesn't happen until April or May. And so wondering if there is a way to kind of accelerate that and have those conversations that would eventually, I think, find its way on that table. But I see that there are many municipalities sending things out. There may be a way for us to kind of join forces on that. It would just be an opportunity to explore that. Councillor Marchand, I see your finger on the...
Yeah, quite a few years ago, I think all the municipalities and towns got together just to have Bell come down and have some discussions, and they had charts with all the low service areas. It seems now it's almost everywhere. So they could just
on the high service areas.
Yeah, the chart could be almost all the eastern side here in Nova Scotia. So
Just a map of
yeah, so I don't know if we should, all get together. Is there an advantage to it? I'm not sure. We all have our own challenges. Some areas have better service than others, but definitely, if you need a motion, a I don't even think you need one. If you guys want to do something about it, the residents of Richmond County will just be delighted, so.
Yeah, I would entertain a motion, and that would put it on our action item list so that folks could kind of refer back to it. It just gives some clarity. It's a dedicated to-do.
So then I'll make a motion that we authorize the warden and the CAO to have some discussions with the neighboring towns and municipalities to regionally discuss declining cell service.
I'm happy to second that, because I'd like to find a place in Nova Scotia that hasn't seen deteriorating service over the last few years. It's, it's obvious to everybody.
Yeah, so I think there's strength in numbers in terms of advocating for these kinds of letters of discontent. So we'll see where that takes it, and I'll report back. So there's a motion on the floor, moved by Councillor Marchand, seconded by Deputy Warden Sampson. Is there any discussion on that, Councillor Marchand?
And I guess more people are noticing it because a lot of people got rid of their landlines and are using cell service more. So
Had to have a landline reinstalled.
yeah, and I mean, we're thinking of that. Many people are starting to rethink that whole idea of getting a landline. So is this a business decision? Who knows? Right. Just sit and wonder, get everybody back to landlines. But
Definitely is a serious issue, and that has become more serious because we gave up our landlines, absolutely. And what they'll say is that because people gave up their landlines, it drove more people to the cell service, and it's draining. But there should have been some, that's not rocket science. Okay, so there's a motion on the floor. Any other discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries.
So now there's complaints about cellular phone service coming from Antigonish County and Port Hawkesbury. I was at the town council meeting last week, and one of the town councilors brought it up about the deteriorating level of service, which is the exact same word that was used here at council. Does it seem like the situation is getting worse? Is it spreading? What's your take on what's going on?
Yeah, I think it is getting worse, and it is getting worse, to quote even the conversations that we had with Bell when the CAO and I spoke to them. So just to sort of clarify that, previous council made a motion to ask Bell to come, and Bell said, no, thank you. And so, but they did, and we can't compel them to come, but we did say, well, okay, you're going to talk to the CAO and I. And some of the things that they talked about are that, there are people who got rid of their landlines. Why? Because we had decent cell service. So people got rid of them. So that means nobody's using your landline at home. Everybody has gone to cells. If you look at your cell phone right now, you probably have a lot of apps running in the background that are taking from the cell service that's available to you. We had an increase in residents. We had Chromebooks given to every single student in Richmond County. So for several years. So you're talking about those devices draining additional service. And so as more people use devices and more of them come online, it drains the existing service. So there's and the equipment itself is also deteriorating. So, and it was never built for the kind of capacity that it needs. Yeah, I don't care. It's an essential service. And it is time that government and the service providers become acutely aware that this is not Richmond County complaining. It's not Rocky Bay complaining. It's not Discoos complaining. It's not even Framboys and Horseshoe complaining anymore. You're talking about municipalities that stretch from Antigonish County to Victoria, to the ends of Richmond, including the towns and all parts in between. And I certainly wouldn't think that Cape Breton CBRM is saying, yay, everything's perfect here, but our responsibility is for the rural communities like Richmond. And so when we received this letter on the heels of also hearing that Port Hawkesbury had also looking at ways to explore a sort of a strength in numbers advocacy approach. So, what kind of fruit that will bear, I don't know, but I think that there are strength in numbers, and for exactly that reason, we'd like to pursue that.
Under unfinished business, council discussed tax exemption bylaw number 56.
We have a staff report regarding the tax exemption bylaw 56. Interestingly, we have a lot of people who are at community calls here tonight. And so a little background, we had one motion of council going back many moons ago that essentially had two parts to it. So there was some question about whether staff had recommendations about opening up bylaw 56. So for folks who maybe don't know, we have a bylaw that allows for community groups to be exempt from paying property tax on their buildings. And so we closed that up a while back, and we continuously get people asking us, can we open it up again? And then at-home housing was created, finally a not-for-profit in Richmond and in the town of Port Hawkesbury. So we were looking for ways to see, can we support that group in any particular way? And so what are the implications of bylaw 56 and what are the advantages and disadvantages for that kind of reopening? So maybe I'll turn it over to the CAO, who can invite our Director of Finance to speak as you see fit.
Absolutely.
So we're just going to turn it over to the Director of Finance.
Absolutely. The report is there with the recommendations and even the suggested motion for council's consideration. But if anybody has questions for either myself or Kathleen, feel free to or add other suggestions to us or edits to the recommendation. It's there for you.
Go ahead. I guess I have a question. And I'll be honest, when I looked at the package, I was trying to go back in the minutes and find the exact wording of the motion and look in the action list. I can't find it anywhere, but I know we did it. Anyways, my search skills are not as adept as our clerks. I guess I should have just probably called you Shelley. But anyway, I will do that next time. The point being is that I feel like we really zeroed in on should we reopen this or should we not? And I understand the arguments around yes or no. Especially no. That being said, I feel like the point might be a little bit missed, or not really, or maybe we just need to take a step back, and I don't know that we discussed that when we talked about it originally. If we took a step back, though, and just looked at overall, remember we've talked about, okay, we're doing this new sponsorship advertising sort of policy. We've got our grants policy that we've worked really hard on, and budgetary resources assigned to those. We've got this bylaw 56. When we look at it all together, like, is there some other mechanism that would enable us to do better in supporting organizations that are part of our group that we support now, but also for new ones like At Home that pop up in the future? Some more flexible tool that would, and I don't know if it's a tool, like I think we really tunnel visioned on the tool and probably did so in our discussions, but is there a different framework that we should be looking at overall, or an adjusted one? And maybe it is that we create something new in addition to bylaw 56, but I still feel like bylaw 56 is not quite doing what all of the things that I think it could do, and it's because there is no financial incentive for properties to appeal their assessments, right? So that's where I've kind of fall down on it a little.
Yeah, and to be clear, what happens is we have halls, for example, and we have other groups like the Hearts of Almadam is not a hall, but there are community groups that are under the umbrella of bylaw 56. And as a result, you do not pay property tax. So sometimes you think, okay, we don't pay property tax. What a lot of organizations aren't aware of is that even though you're not paying property tax, it isn't just that the municipality isn't collecting money from your hall. We still have to pay out your portion of our, what are they called, mandatory contributions? So let's suppose your building is worth $500,000. There's a percentage of that we still have to dish out. So what we're wondering, and there is I think there's a place for conversations between councillors and their community groups. When you get your assessment in January, that's going to come in the mail in the next couple of days. If you look at that and say, well, I don't have to pay it, so it doesn't matter what it says. But if there is a look-see at it and say, I don't think this building is worth that, then we would like to see halls say, flip the page over and appeal, and just like homeowners do, and say, I don't think that's fair. Like that's not what this hall is worth. Because even though you're not paying property tax, we're still paying out our mandatory contributions for policing and for, so we're looking at nothing to do with, we're not asking for more for money from halls. We're wondering if there's a way to incentivize people to say, could you flip that page over and fill out the thing that says, I don't think this is worth this much, so that you're still paying zero, but we're not paying out as much for the mandatory contributions.
In excess of 400,000.
Yeah, so we pay out $400,000 for all of the, so you folks aren't paying property tax, those bylaw 56. We pay out $400,000 from municipal dollars for those. So if we could get that down to $390,000, that's still $10,000 that we would save pushing that out. So I think there is a way for us to meet with, because it's not it's not a monster of a list. There's, I think, is it 40? Do I have some number like that? But divided between us, I think there's a way that we could, speak to our community groups and say, it's not a long process. Just flip the page over and say, I don't think this is worth that much. So I think but we did specifically talk, though, Deputy Warden, about potentially opening up bylaw 56 for at home. And I think what we're seeing here is that might not be, like, opening it up to new groups is just more than we can do. Kathleen?
Yeah, and I think that's why I had recommended that we proceed with the distribution of the draft letter, encouraging the organizations that are currently on the list to appeal. The other thing that I found is that in our conversations, we're looking at supporting housing developments and have an appetite for that. However, the MGA does not have a place for it, and that's where we're kind of restricted in that way to provide tax exemptions to, like, we can't offer a no tax to like a development. So for example, if there's a housing development or anything like that, we want to support them through a tax initiative. We're not able to currently, as the MGA currently stands. So that's why my recommendation was that the municipality look at providing or sending a letter to the Department of Municipal Affairs to provide rural, especially all Nova Scotians really, with the opportunity to allow rebates within the MGA, so that way they're communities like ours that have a housing crisis, which most Nova Scotia communities have that issue, so that way we're able to support them in that way. Because I know that when we talked about the bylaw 56, the current ones that are on the bylaw, those have already been taken care of, but by them appealing the assessment value, it would potentially have a cost savings. However, the appetite to help development or new development is restricted because of the MGA.
I went to a presentation in Port Hawkesbury, and they were talking about trying to entice a hotel to come to Port Hawkesbury. Because a hotel is a commercial endeavor, the MGA does allow for certain things. So they were saying, listen, you come to Port Hawkesbury and you'll only have to pay 10% of your property tax the first year, 20% the second year, 30%, because recognizing the costs are astronomical, and that, they want to entice people to build in their community. I think that's great. We don't have the ability, we don't have the authority. MGA does not permit us to do that for affordable housing. So if we had a developer who wanted to do affordable seniors housing in Richmond County, we don't have the ability to say you don't have to pay your entire tax bill. We cannot take 5 cents off their tax bill. So I think that we want to see housing in Richmond County, and if there are ways that we can recognize the exorbitant costs, and to quote one of our developers, the math has to math in order for developers and not-for-profits to start putting people in homes in Richmond County. So wonder if a motion might be to, because I've had this conversation with our MLA, and wonder if an alternate motion might be to send this to the NSFM as an advocacy issue.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I think that has plagued folks before is when it goes from one municipality to the province, it doesn't carry as much weight as something that can be a position statement from the NSFM. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, if I may, at our CAO meeting, we brought this up as well because we had discussed earlier that when the Minister of Municipal Affairs was coming here, this is one of the things we were going to talk to him about, was having the phased-in taxation for residential, similar to as it is for commercial. So I mentioned it to all the other regional CAOs, and I said, expect to see a letter from us. And hopefully you guys can jump on and do your support letters as well. So if you wanted to do one, there was wide support at that table that they were sure their councils would jump on this because it affects everywhere in Nova Scotia. We're all governed by the MGA and we just can't do anything on the residential until that changes.
And again, it would be an option in our toolkit. Doesn't mean we have to, but it would be something that would allow us to have the conversation. So Deputy Warden Mumberket is one of our reps for the Strait Region, so maybe I'll hear what you have to say on that.
Yep, no, I think that's a great idea. I think in particular to at-home housing, because they're a nonprofit, it gives us a flexibility. But for a private developer doing affordable housing, then we don't have it. So I would make a motion to authorize the warden to send a letter to the Minister of Municipal Affairs requesting adjustments to the Municipal Government Act to enable municipalities to provide tax rebates and incentives to residential affordable housing developers, and further to request that this become an advocacy priority for NSFN.
Are you hoping to see that copy to other copy?
And copy to the whole planet if you would like. Yeah. Okay.
Our normal
Yeah.
6 or 8. that
Copy
we
to
send
our local municipal group. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. We have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Sean Sampson. Any discussion on that?
Couple of things, I guess. Not against it. You're making the statement that there's 438,000 in mandatory contributions that are lost. I didn't think all the tax revenue that we are giving back to these halls was mandatory contributions. So what portion of that 438 is actually mandatory? Would it be somewhere about 60%? Because we're making the statement, it's all that we're paying. So we're not paying everything.
No, the total we forgive is over 400,000.
Yeah, we're forgiving that. Yeah. The other, I guess my thoughts are, when we're putting a group on the tax exemption, whether it's a private developer or whatever, I can't see how the MGA would stop us from putting a not-for-profit private developer housing group. If they start a not-for-profit, because I know if we open this, we're going to have a flood of extra, and that's no, I know, but that's the worry I have. And some are going to argue that some on that list definitely don't qualify because they're really not-for-profits. So I don't see where the MGA would stop us from. It's all in the wording on this, how a private developer decides to set up their corporation or whatever if it's not-for-profit, because we could open it and put those on without having any changes to the MGA. So I'm not against what you're suggesting. Hopefully they could make it easy. But regardless, when we start doing that, others right now that are sitting there waiting are going to say, well, why didn't you ask for the exemption for us? And that's the worry I have. No, it's not. But that's, when we're looking for this, we just best be careful what we're looking for. Because if we do it and we're going to put this group on, I know there's a few other groups right now that are not-for-profits that would love to get on this. And, when that motion was made, we stopped everybody. They'll be waiting, so.
There is no discussion about reopening bylaw 56. So whoever's in there is in there. You don't pay property tax, you're not going to pay property tax. We would like to see appeals to kind of reduce our mandatory contributions. What we're saying is, if the Municipal Government Act was amended, and I don't think there has been a legislative session where they didn't open up the MGA and amend something. It is one of the most often pieces of legislation that is amended. If they were to amend it to allow councils to explore other ways to support affordable housing, it would be something in our toolkit that we could consider. And we can debate who would get it and whatever. Currently, we aren't permitted. Bylaw bylaw 56 is the way we do it, but opening that up is not worth it for the number for a number of reasons outlined here. And I apologize, I said 400,000 is what we pay out. It's not. It's what we don't collect. But the percentage of that we dish out is about, what percent do we dish out? Well, yeah, anyway, we pay out money, whatever the dollar amount is, we'd like to pay out less. So apologies, it's not 400,000. Right. So we have a motion on the floor, and it has been seconded, and that is to send a letter to Municipal Affairs, copied with the NSFM as an advocacy issue, and copied to our regional partners. So is there any other discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Now, Kathleen had also suggested a draft letter that would only say, I'll just read it, as property assessments from property valuation services will be issued soon, we ask that you review your assessment carefully when it arrives. Please ensure the assessed value accurately reflects your property. If you have concerns, contact PVSC promptly and file an appeal before the deadline if necessary. Accurate assessments help the municipality keep tax rates low while continuing to offer exemptions to your organization. We are providing this notice in advance so organizations and property owners have sufficient time to review and respond once assessments are received. So it's got nothing to do with changing it. It is just asking people to assess. So that is a letter that has been drafted and prepared. Would be interested in a motion to send that to all organizations currently on the bylaw 56 list.
I'd be happy to make that motion.
So that's moved by by Councillor Brent Sampson, seconded by Councillor Marchand.
Any discussion on that?
I want to say that this has been a topic of discussion for years and years and years. Even having PVSC and asking PVSC to look at these halls, and nothing has changed. You know, I admire the attempt, but somehow we have to put some dollars with it to say, well, maybe we're going to charge you a little bit of taxes or something to make them. Well, it just seems it's not ever been happening. Their assessments are going up, and I see it, you know, the buildings that I'm involved with, and it doesn't change.
Yeah, Warden, you took the words out of my mouth there. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think for us 5 councillors around this table, it falls on us to review this list and work with our nonprofits that's on bylaw 56 to say, you know, please help us and try to, you know, appeal this process. We do it for residents. I get calls from residents all the time talking about their assessments, and I guide them to appeal it as well. So yeah, I think it's our job to work with these nonprofits to make sure they appeal it as well. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries.
So when it comes to the tax exemption policy, is there a belief, or is there kind of a worry that people running the halls are a little bit hesitant on appealing their assessments?
I don't think they're hesitant to appeal their assessments. I think they aren't incentivized. So you and I are going to get, and our residents, our homeowners who are listening this month, in the next week or so, because they're in the mail now, you're going to get your property assessments from PVSC in the mail. And lots of people are going to have sticker shock, and they're going to say, are you kidding me? And when you flip it over, it explains how you can appeal that. So that was Councillor Sampson's comment, right? And I agree. He and I have both, as I'm sure all the other councillors have had conversations with residents who are looking at this and saying, holy catfish, multiply that by 0.85 plus my fire levy, that's a lot of money. What is happening through no fault of anyone's, this is not meant to be accusatory whatsoever, but if you look at the organizations on that list, when they get their property assessments, they can look at it and say, that's kind of high. But there is no problem for them because they're paying 0 cents, which is fine. We want to support community groups. They do important work. They do the work for residents. So happy to support them. But we don't just not collect, and I made a mistake in the meeting. I said we pay out $400,000, but I got that wrong. We should be collecting $400,000 from those groups, but we don't collect that. But we pay out a percentage back to the province for things like, we don't do corrections anymore, I think, but we do education and we do police and all of that. So we're paying out money that we're not receiving. So what we're trying to do is to work with halls and community groups that are in that collection of people under bylaw 56 to say, look, here's how you do it. I'll sit down, I'll help you do it. But if you look at your assessment and it is too high, there is a cost to the municipality. It's not $0 because we pay out based on that.
So with the need to increase availability of housing and the fact that, I don't know, time is of the essence. I wouldn't say you guys are under the gun, but there's a need to get this done. Is there a real pressing need to make these changes to the Municipal Government Act so you guys can really get going on housing?
I think there is. We have talked to developers several times, and I use this expression a lot, but one of the developers said the math has to math. And everybody who's gone to a hardware store knows the price of everything has gone up. And there is only so much that residents can afford to pay in rent. So if you look at your balance book and you say, here's how much it's going to cost me to build units, and here's how much rent I can charge, there is a disparity. You can't expect developers to go in the hole to build housing. So if we could say, what are some of the ways that we can reduce their expenses so that they can charge a reasonable, affordable rent and still recoup some of the expenses that went into the lumber and the plumbing and the electrical, then that's something that we are happy to do. The problem is the MGA doesn't allow it. It would allow it if it was a commercial venture. So if we had somebody who wanted to build a hotel out there right now, we would be able to, in council here, say, do they have to pay 100% of their, what if we told them for the first 5 years they only have to pay 50% just to get them to come here? We're allowed to do that. We're allowed to discuss it. We would vote on it. Don't know how it would turn out, but we're allowed to have that. We can't even ask. We can't even discuss it. It's not permitted in the MGA. So as far as we're concerned, anything that incentivizes the creation of additional affordable housing, we absolutely should be doing. And it is, there's not a day that goes by that I don't talk to somebody about a housing challenge.
Thank you for watching. Please tune in again to find out what we will be talking about on The Record.